So, they actually didn't. They were very happy to live, and they tried to destroy our Judaism. And it was the Maccabees who did a revolt. They weren't trying to kill us. So it wasn't a physical. It wasn't the Nazis saying every Jew has to die. Yours. It was very different. Purim was very clearly, if you're Jewish, it was Nazi, Germany, 1930s, 1940s. Yeah. If you're Jewish, they even looked up your lineage. You're Jewish, you die. In the time of Chanukah, it wasn't about that. As a matter of fact, there were many Jews who became Hellenists, and they started following the Greek way, and they weren't in danger. And there was no,
physical danger. They were spiritual.
Of course, right. And that's what the story, right. That's what the battle of Hanukkah is all about, that it was a spiritual danger much more than a physical danger. And so that's really that's the nuance of the holiday of Hanukkah that we're going to be learning about today. Based on what it says when it talks about the holiday of Hanukkah, it talks about that it took them a year to establish the holiday of Hanukkah. It wasn't like Purim. Immediately, as soon as they did it, they sent out letters to everyone. They got the approval of Jewish people that it's going to be a holiday. And with Hanukkah took them a full year. And let's try to understand why. So I'll start. First one is in the Talmud tractate, Shabbos. Mahu Chanukah. What is Chanukah? When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. When the Hashmonaim monarchy overcame them, they searched and found only one cruse of oil with the seal of the high priest intact. There was only sufficient oil there to light the menorah for one day. Yet a miracle occurred, and the menorah remained lit for 8 days. The next year, the sages instituted these days as a holiday with the recitation of Hallel and special thanksgiving to Hashem. Rashi on this Gemara says the sages instituted these days as holidays with recitation of Hallel and special thanksgiving. It is not forbidden to work on the holiday, as they were only designated for reciting Hallel and Alanisim as part of Thanksgiving. The Rebbe asks, why wait a full year? Some Jewish holidays were established in the Torah. As the verse states, celebrate for me 3 holidays during the year. The Torah itself establishes the times and the manners in which to celebrate these holidays. Other holidays are established in our tradition. These are Purim and Chanukah.
Yes, but for some reason I can't share. Can I forward this to the group or no?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No problem. But there's a difference between the two, between Purim and Chanukah. With regard to Purim, the Megillah clearly states that the war took place on the 13th of Adar, and on the very next day, the 14th, the people rested and made it a day of feasting and celebration, while the Jews of Shushan did the same a day later. That's what we have Shushan for. In other words, the holiday was established that very year. As soon as they won, it was okay, let's celebrate, let's make a holiday. However, the Talmud says regarding Chanukah, the next year the sages instituted these days as a holiday. This distinction must first be explained as a literal level. And that will then lead us to understand the underlying message and lesson. In general, we know that the sages, before enacting a new law, would check to see whether it was a decree which the people would be able to handle. So in general, that was the halacha. That's the way they established law. For example, I don't know if it says, I think it says in here, with Purim, it says they wanted to establish a holiday where you're not allowed to work.
Right, it says here they rested.
Well, they rested from work. So you're still not allowed to, you're not supposed to go to work, but you're allowed to, it's not the same work as like Shabbos and holidays. Right, so they established no belacha.
Right.
And the people of the time did not accept it. They said that's going to be too hard, we're not doing it. And therefore, halacha became that you're allowed to do melacha and Purim. It's because it had to be accepted by everyone. There's something else also. I think there's something with Pas Yisrael. I can't remember, Bishul Yisrael. There's something else I think Kashrus that the Chachamim instituted, and people said that's going to be too hard. We cannot do that, and therefore became halacha that you're allowed to eat that food. Something in kosher. It escapes my. I should ask for my niece, and he for sure knows Kashrus. But there's something that they instituted, and people said, "No, we're not." No. For kashrus.
Oh,
there's something in kashrus that's similar. They instituted something and people said, too hard, we can't do it. And so they abolished it and said, okay, that's not halacha. So there's something about instituting new xeris, new decrees, that the people at the time have to accept it. Not us, we can't decide now if we want to accept it or not, right? But at the time, the majority or the communities, whatever it was, maybe the leadership had to say, yes, we can do this. With Purim, they said, But this is too hard. We're not doing another day of holiday where we can't turn on a fire and we can't, so it became a day of rest. It does say in Allah, you're not allowed to go to work, but you can drive, you can cook, right? Okay. So on a surface level, that may be why it took a year to establish the holiday of Purim. They had to, Hanukkah, they had to get the approval of everyone. They had to send it out to the communities and say, this is what we want to do. We want to establish this as a holiday. These will be the halachas. You have to light the menorah this time, this and that. And people, So the Rebbe is saying maybe that's why, on a basic level, that's why it took a year.
The day after they didn't just like stop everything.
Exactly. They needed a year to get the approval of everyone. By the next year, it was approved, and they said, okay, this is an established holiday. Maybe on a basic level, that's what it is. But obviously, everything also has a deeper meaning, right? So source 2, do you want to read, Lana?
Mm-hmm. Maimonides, Mishneh Torah, Hilchot Mamrim. When a court sees it necessary to issue a decree, institute an edict, or establish a custom, they must first contemplate the matter and see whether or not the majority of the community can uphold the practice. We never issue a decree on the community unless the majority of the community can uphold the practice.
Yeah, there are certain things like going to the mikvah and having certain impurities that the people said this is too hard. And because of that, since Ezra the Sofer, because people didn't accept it, since Ezra the Sofer, it's only optional. It's optional, it's better, but it's not halacha because people didn't accept it. Now, anything from the Torah itself, there's no survey being done. It's almost like amendments, lehavdil, amendments have to be proven constitutional in court, right? Or when they pass a new law, right? Until it's enacted, but then it's always, they always try to bring it to Supreme Court to prove that it's constitutional, right? With new laws that are established. It's similar to that. Laws of the Torah, bring Karban Pesach, eat matzah for 7 days. We're not surveying people to see if they want to do it. Hashem said to do it. But any new decrees that the rabbis do have to pass the masses. Make sure that they're...
In the Torah, since we're referring to the Torah, we only have 3 holidays. What about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
Also, Shalosh Regalim are the 3 holidays. Those are days of prayer. They're not, yes, they're holidays, but there's a very big distinction in the Torah between those 3 and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur.
Is it D'oraita though? The Rosh Hashanah?
Yes.
Not questioning it, of course, that's
No, it says it in the Torah. Yeah, no, it says it in the Torah, but it's 2 different things. It's the beginning of the year. You're celebrating the beginning of the year, and we don't do work. It says the first day of the 7th month you shall not do work, but you should bring these karbanos. It says it in the Torah.
Would people go to the temple?
No, so you could go, but there were 3 times a year when everybody went.
Yeah,
and Rosh Hashanah is not one of them,
and Yom Kippur also.
And Yom Kippur is not one of them.
It's just funny because everybody comes to Yom Kippur.
We always say
the
that.
Most non-religious Jews will go.
It's very funny. Reform conservative, they always talk about Yom Kippur as the most important day of the year. It's the holiest day of the year. It's not the most important day of the year. Who said it's more important than Rosh Hashanah? It's like, whoa, it's an awe-filled day. But who said it's more important than celebrating Pesach? I don't think it says that in Torah.
Jews,
yeah,
they all go even to the point where, not now, because now it's Russian and Ukrainian zone, but if the Jewish people own the Russian store, which have nothing to do with religion, they would be closed on Yom Kippur in Brooklyn.
Right.
It was like, whoa.
I'll tell you why, because Yom Kippur is one day, and it's like the holiest day, the day where we ask for forgiveness, so people can handle, okay, the one day I'm not going to drive. The one day, you know what I mean? Can't do that every Shabbos. But is it really more important than Shabbos?
Interesting.
Is it more important than eating matzah on Pesach? I don't know.
Right. So the word you're mentioning distinction between the word importance and holiness, right?
Right. It's not more important. It's the holiest day. Yeah, it's the day when we feel Hashem the most. But is it more important to observe that day than to observe Pesach? Not necessarily. I'm not trying to take away from Yom Kippur. People should still give Yom Kippur, but it became a thing. It became a thing. In those days, people didn't go to the temple on Yom Kippur. Everyone came 3 times. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. But 3 times you came up. The rest of the time you celebrated at home. You fasted at home. People couldn't go.
Interesting, because this is in the times of the temple. Like the temple was just destroyed, and like the day after Chanukah, they didn't want to be like, let's celebrate and go to the temple and try to build rebuild the day after Yom Kippur, we start to build a sukkah. It's a mitzvah to start to build a sukkah, to be closer to Hashem and to go into.
So I think they celebrated in their own way, but it wasn't an
Yeah.
instituted holiday.
Of course, but
Right.
it's just interesting that it didn't like
Right.
progress into it,
Right,
like, let's start right away, let's triumph, and
Right,
not.
right.
I feel like there's that element of grief though, that was. I kind of like.
It wasn't destroyed, by the way.
And that's
The temple wasn't destroyed.
That was.
They
during
messed
the
it up.
second
It was
temple,
destroyed.
right.
It was messed up, they broke the menorah.
You go clean up after.
It was
you know.
So they did,
desecrated.
no, but they did. They did, they finished the war. The following day, they went into the temple, they cleaned it up, and they were looking for the oil. And that's where the miracle of the oil happened. So they did go back in and rededicate it. They rededicated the temple. They started bringing korbanos to it. They took the idols out, they fixed it, and then they wanted to light the menorah, and they didn't have oil. And then the oil lasted, but it wasn't instituted as a holiday forever. It wasn't put in place. Okay, now this is a holiday. It took a year for them to say, these are days we celebrate. So,
And this was after Purim.
yes, this was after Purim. Purim was first.
Instituted, Purim occurred first. Was
Yes.
it also instituted first?
Yeah, it was instituted immediately.
Was it
Purim,
instituted
yeah.
immediately?
That's why, that's the
But
question.
the whole
Here.
event took like 10 years, and then
Here.
the whole event was a year between the time when
Yes.
she fasted and when.
That's
it
right, but
actually occurred. It
once,
was like-
once Haman was killed, once the decree, they celebrated, it says the next day they celebrated it.
And they
And it
edicted-
became a holiday.
It became an.
Look, you're actually reading this, exactly what you're asking.
Source 3, the process to institute Purim. Therefore, the Jewish villagers who live in open towns made the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of joy, feast, and a holiday with sending presents of food to one another.
Almost here, joy, feast, holiday, almost sounds like Pesach. Or a holiday.
No, to me, that sounds total like.
There's
There's no cleaning your house
Purim.
here.
But no, in other words, no, I mean, they actually
joking,
celebrate like a
I'm
real
joking.
holiday. It wasn't just like, woo,
Yeah,
a real
yeah.
holiday. Right?
And Mordecai inscribed these laws and sent letters to all the Jews who were to all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, instructing them to make the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day thereof every year, as days when Jews rested from their enemies, and the months that was reversed for them from grief to joy, from mourning to a festive day, making them the days of feasting and joy, and sending portions of food one to another and gifts to the poor.
So I just want to point out a difference. In the first text, I know you read it in English, so you don't see it so much. And therefore, the Jewish villagers who lived in open towns made the 14th day of the month of Adar a day of joy, feast, and a holiday. The word holiday, that's what I'm saying. It sounds like Pesach. I'm going to read it in Hebrew, okay? Simcha, joy, mishteh, feast, v'yom tov.
Yom Tov. Okay, so.
Yom tov is a holiday. It sounds like
Yom
Pesach,
Tov. Uh-huh.
Shavuos, Sukkot. In the next paragraph, where Mordecai writes it down for posterity, right? He wrote it doesn't say Yom Tov.
Interesting. So originally
It
it was
says,
intended to.
As Yom Arba Asariya, Kayimim Asher Nachu B'Yam, hold on, Miyagonis, whatever. Yeah, so time to make them Yemei Mishteh, days of feasting, B'Simcha, and joy, or Mishlach Manot, and sending Mishlach Manos, a person, one to another, and giving money to the poor. Doesn't write Yom Tov. Do you see the difference? Originally,
More the comparison in the second way that it was written down, it was like from mourning to joy. It
right,
wasn't
but
just
then,
like,
this
this is what it is.
No, but afterwards it does. Look, it says, as days,
Yeah,
the month of mourning to a festive day, right? Making them days at the end, making them days of feasting and joy and sending portions of food. So when it actually says what you're supposed to do, it doesn't say Yom Tov. Originally, the first time he said it was Yom Tov. Guys, Yom Tov, holiday tomorrow, don't work. And then when he writes down what they're doing, he doesn't write it. And the Rebbe explains why. Rabbi Ben Bava once said, well, now this is not the Rebbe, we're bringing a Gemara that says, the Jewish people, do you see that?
Mhm.
Okay, go. Whoever wants.
Rava, the son of Rava once said, the Jewish people accepted upon themselves the prohibitions against eulogizing and fasting on Purim, but they did not accept upon themselves the prohibition against performing labor. This is proven from when Mordecai and Esther proposed a celebration of Purim. It said it was a day of joy, feast, and a holiday. At the end, when the celebration of Purim was accepted by the Jewish people, it said days of feasting and joy, whereas the term holiday is not written. This is because the people never accepted upon themselves the prohibition against performing labor on Purim.
You understand? So they tried, and people were like, We're not doing another Pesach. We're not doing another Sukkot. We'll celebrate. We won't eulogize. We won't say Tachanun. We won't do work. Like we won't go to work. But we're not doing a full Yantif. And therefore, that's what was instituted as halacha.
Can you imagine fast day and then Purim, like a Yom, like actually Yom Tov, but then you have to hear Megillah, but you can't drive to shul because it's a Yom Tov. And then you have to walk
Right.
there, and if you don't, let's say you're in a hospital or something, then someone can't necessarily ship it over. You're like, sorry, it's Yom Tov, I can't.
No, but if it's Yom Tov, you can carry, but.
Oh,
True, yeah.
okay.
No, definitely,
But it's like
I think we
school,
can't even,
Right. It's the
I
same
think
as
as women,
as
we can't even process it
What?
being a Yom Tov. As women, I think we cannot.
I love Yantif. But yeah.
No, we love Yom Tov, but Purim for me cannot be Yom Tov because it's associated with loud music.
Right.
It's like,
right.
I don't know, it's.
Right. That's why
different
people said no.
association.
And that's why it became the holiday that it is. So maybe that's why this Purim happened before, not too long before. Maybe that's why with Chanukah, they waited. Like we're not making a holiday yet. We know what happened with Purim, that when they accepted, they didn't accept what Mordechai and Esther first said. So let's survey everyone first and see how this is going to work. Okay, the public rejected the idea.
This is also true regarding the enactment of the Purim holiday. During the first Purim celebration, the details were not finalized. Initially, it is mentioned as a holiday, but later the term holiday is omitted.
Yeah.
Although Mordechai and Esther wanted to establish a holiday during which work is prohibited, the people didn't accept it. They accepted the decree against eulogies and fast days, but they did not agree to cease from work. Therefore, work is not prohibited on Purim. With this story in mind, we can assume that when the sages decided to establish the holiday of Hanukkah, they didn't set down all the customs in an explicit manner during the first. Knowing from the story of Purim that the community did not accept it, they waited a year, during which they determined what the community would accept and what they would not. And then they established Hanukkah as a day of thanksgiving and celebration during which work is permitted.
Right.
You see, they connected the Thanksgiving and celebration together. It's American. For American, they connected the Thanksgiving and the other celebration for Jews.
Right. So basically, they knew what happened with Purim, and they didn't jump to any conclusions and say, okay, this is what we're establishing. Let's wait. Let's take a survey. Let's make sure. That's on a very basic level. The Rebbe explains why it took a year. The Rebbe says everything also has a much deeper meaning to it. And they weren't only deciding, which custom should we institute? They were also deciding whether or not this was a victory worth celebrating. I know to us this sounds crazy because Chanukah is so like, oh, we're celebrating and such, but we're going to delve a little bit into the history that was going on and the state of the Jewish people at that time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so happy.
No.
And it wasn't such a clear victory. And we'll go through it and understand why.
Right, that's
I
what I
think
was
that's
thinking
what I
of
was about
why
saying,
maybe
yeah.
they didn't start celebrating right away because it wasn't so clear. It was very distraught, like, when we think of like when they crossed the Red Sea, and they went through and then we automatically in our brains are like, they rejoiced, they were exciting, they were dancing, but like, if you think about it, I'm sure they were really confused.
No, but also
Like,
Purim.
it
yeah.
took them a minute to process what was going on and like, are they really gone?
Right.
Are they really gonna come after us? Like, what do we do now? We assume that they're celebrating and rejoicing.
But it says that
but
they
their
were
minds and
afraid.
minds changed. They
Right.
didn't know.
Right. It
But
says
it's
that
also-
they were afraid of coming from, they probably ran out to see the other way in the coming.
Yeah.
It says that's why Hashem spit them out on the shore
Right, to show.
because they didn't believe. They were like, they're coming after us. They were very confused. You're right.
So after this, they're probably also like, who's hiding? Who's, like, I'm sure that there's some sort of dispute of if it's really over or like, what's gonna be now?
Yes. And also
also
on a spiritual level, was this a real victory or did we just chase some people out of town? But is this a real victory because of the way they were?
But also
done.
with Purim, people
Mhm.
unified due to what happened in Purim.
That's right.
People actually, they say this was a time when we accepted Torah again
That's
on
right.
a different level. And all the Jews actually accepted themselves
That's
on
right.
a spiritual level. They connected and confirmed that, that they're going to accept all the mitzvah of Torah. This was a different time.
That's
A lot of
correct.
Jews died.
That's right.
There was a big happening to it now, right?
Mhm.
What happening in Israel? Some Jews were Hellenized, what we call now, right? People who don't believe that Torah is the way. And some Jews, so this was, I think, that's another reason why it took them a year. Do we celebrate the fact that the Jews were killed as part of the, what do you call that? The inner war, what do you call that one? When the same nation killed each other. Civil war.
Right,
yeah.
and also I think the, on a simple level also, the story of Purim, like you said, they united, yeah, a simple level, there was a decree to kill them, the decree was annulled. It's very clear cut.
And there was a date.
The Holocaust is over.
And also, I think
Right?
maybe based on Purim, because on Purim they first said, let's institute the rule that it's a holiday, and then the Jews said, I don't know if we want a Yom Tov. We want a holiday, but not Yom Tov. So over here, again, keeping in mind that the Jews were polarized, the nation was polarized, I think the rabbis got together, instituted the rules, and then they said, okay, here's a holiday, and this is the rules. That could be also that.
Right,
like-
and they also, we'll see, it wasn't like everyone recognized Hashem at the end of Hanukkah, but we'll go through it now inside,
Inside,
okay?
yeah.
Source 5, you wanna read?
Okay. Purim is when Jewish lives were saved, while Hanukkah is not. The Greeks did not intend to kill Jews. They just wanted them to be subjugated and to abandon their religion.
Right, and we'll see, the source for this is in Midrash Rabbah. Darkness, wanna read?
Darkness alludes to
Mhm.
the exile under the Greeks, when the eyes of the Jews were darkened by their abusive decrees. They commanded, inscribe on the horn of your oxen that you have no part in the God of Israel.
Mhm. Keep going, source 7.
The Greek rulers enacted decrees upon the Jews, forbidding them to learn Torah, circumcise their sons, keep Shabbat, and forcing them to serve idols.
Mhm. Right, these are specifically and you know, what was very interesting is it wasn't just any Torah, because the Greeks, if you know the Hellenists, if you understand the culture of that time, they were very strong on studying cultures, and they were very open to other books and other studies.
Yeah.
What they didn't like is the spirituality of the Torah. That we said that we circumcise a child when they're 8 years old, so they don't understand, 8 days old, they don't even understand what they're doing. That's just spiritual. Let them have a choice, do it when they're older. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Everything was about logic and understanding and philosophy.
Democracy.
So anything that was not philosophical and connected to things that made sense, that had the intellectual,
About logic.
they forbade. The idea of learning Torah because it's God's wisdom, they forbade. You could learn it as another subject in the library, put it with all the other books, that's fine. It's a beautiful book of philosophy and history, but not because it's God's holy wisdom. Circumcision, same thing. You're saying you're connecting to God and it's something holy that you don't even understand, it's beyond your understanding, that's forbidden. Holidays, same idea. You can do the traditions, you can eat challah, you can eat the matzah to remember things, but they can't be holy days. You cannot celebrate them as something holy, like this day is different. There's a different dimension of the day. Those are all the things that they forbade.
They felt they were, they actually said they were liberating people. It wasn't just Jews, by the way,
Right.
it's all the nations. They would like, the whole idea was to liberate them from the concise, the limitations of, like some silliness ideas, and that's why the Western civilization is actually based on Greco-Roman ideas. Same thing here, right? If you can't explain it, then it's not true, right?
Although if you, sorry.
But they had so many like the Greek gods. Of,
That's what I was gonna
whatever, so
say.
You would think that they'd be like, oh, all right,
Greek
great.
mythology, yeah, but it was
And they-
all,
But they didn't like that,
stories.
like that authoritative, like one rules over all of them. And maybe that probably bothered them. Like
no, I think it was that those are all beautiful stories
That's right.
and
Those are
beautiful
that's right.
philosophy
Yeah.
and beautiful, and morals from them and beautiful stories, but day-to-day life, live your life.
Did you
You
say
have to
morals?
understand it.
Did you say morals? When you read Greek thing,
Moral
mythology.
of the story,
I
meant,
know,
like,
joking.
right. Yeah. Yep. Okay, source 8. Should I read okay, so there's a book called the Chashmonaim, the book of the
An
Maccabees.
actual book.
Yes, one of the Sfarim, yeah, it's a sefer. And it talks about, at the time, wicked men arose within the nation who persuaded the people, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, because ever since we have distanced ourselves from them, we have faced terrible oppression. The nation agreed and sent a delegation to the king, and the king agreed and commanded them to follow the ways of Greece. They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Hellenist custom. They ceased to perform circumcision on their children. They betrayed the holy covenant and began to do evil in the eyes of God. These were actual Jews. You understand? These aren't Greeks who are forcing, these are Jews. They call themselves the Hellenists, or the Misyavnim, those who, Misyavnim means Greeked. They became Greek. The book of the Maccabees also explains in detail exactly what was going on. When Seleucid died and the empire was passed on to Antiochus the Great, Jason, brother of Onias, the high priest, attempted to take over his brother's place. He told the king, if you give me the high priesthood, I will give you 360 kikar of silver as a payment, and another 80 kikar from donations of other people. In addition, I will pay 150 kikar of silver if you help me install a gymnasium in Jerusalem, where we will educate the youth, and they will have the same laws as the rest of the Antiochia empire. When the king agreed to everything he asked, and he was in command, he convinced the Jews to go in the ways of Greece. He violated all the good laws that were given to the Jews from the previous kings through Yochanan, the son of Apollemos, and Apollemos, who was sent to Rome to broker a peace deal with Rome's elders. He eliminated God's commandments and replaced them with abominations. He built a gymnasium below the city of David, and he commanded all the young and able to play with a covering on their head, with a covering on their head. He spread the covering of the Greeks. He spread the laws of the Greeks across the city, an abomination of Jason, the wicked one, who did not have rights to the priestly service. All the priests abandoned the work of the altar and the sacrifices, shamed the temple, and hurried to the gymnasium to meander and groan with a spear and shield, and to play ball games. They viewed their ancestors' ways as futile, how do you say, and void, and they promoted and praised the ways of Greece. So it wasn't the Greeks that came in, and there was no outer, like they weren't being forced at the time. It was the Jews themselves that were being influenced by the Greeks and bringing it into their own places. It was a Kohen Gadol's brother who took over, and now he's the head. And he told everyone to go to the gymnasium, and they would just quickly do their service as Kohanim and then go there. It was the Jewish people themselves.
This is why there's I don't know if it's Minho, but
Yeah.
To not become like a big head of in power or something, because it just corrupts people so easily.
You mean the
Like in
non-Jewish,
government, no,
the
like,
non-Jewish
no,
government,
in
right? The non
things are not supposed to like try to go after
governmental position, yeah.
governmental positions. Yeah, like
Not in Israel again.
I mean,
Even in Israel, it's a question, but yeah, but I heard that actually in regards to even the story of Mordechai and Esther, about how he had to take care of both the Jewish nation and he had to help Ahasuerus, like he was able to do,
not
but
that
in
you
general.
shouldn't be in it, but you shouldn't like doctors seek it out.
Yeah, I heard of that too.
Okay, gonna read, Hannah? The Rebbe?
Did the Jews really win? The Levush, what's Levush?
It's one of the commentaries. We actually had him over here at the beginning. We go to
Oh, I never heard of him,
yeah.
huh? The Levush writes in his laws of Hanukkah, as cited in Hasidic teachings also, he's a Hasidic commentator, that there is a difference between Hanukkah and Purim. Purim was a bodily salvation. The degree was to annihilate all Jewish people. And the miracle was that they were saved when the situation turned over and they overpowered their enemies. Hanukkah, on the other hand, was a spiritual decree. They tried to force us to forget God's Torah and abandon his laws. The miracle, therefore, was that the spiritual decree was abolished. The difference is reflected in the way the two holidays were established. When a physical decree is annulled, the result is immediately visible. In the story of Purim, the Jews overpowered their enemies on the very day they were supposed to be annihilated. Instead of their own annihilation, their enemies were killed. In other words, the miracle was immediately apparent as an established fact. But in the case of a spiritual persecution, such as the story of Hanukkah, it is more difficult to determine the end of the persecution. The oppression of Judaism did not come only from non-Jews. Jews were also involved as well. The ability to outlaw Judaism is only possible when it also stems from within the Jewish community itself. In this case, it was the presence of Hellenists among the Jews that gave the Greek government the ability to order the Jews to forget God's Torah and abandon Hashem's laws. Even after they found the pure olive oil and the menorah burned for 8 days straight, the sages could not have known how it would impact the world. Did the light penetrate the windows of the temple and reach the population? Was it welcomed by the communities? Did it neutralize the Hellenist elements within the Jewish community? Before the holiday was established a year later, it took a full 12 months with the passage of winter and summer and the full gamut of the yearly cycle to determine that the light of the pure olive oil in the temple had been embraced and established within the Jewish community. Then they established the holiday of Hanukkah for all generations, to be celebrated until the coming of Mashiach, seeing that the miracle had spread beyond the temple, penetrating the diaspora and the exile.
Basically, the Jewish people returned to Hashem. But it took them a while to see that. It wasn't something immediate.
I mean, the ones that converted.
The Hellenists slowly came back to Yiddishkeit, but it took them a while to see that. You know, it's very interesting. It doesn't point it out over here, but it's very interesting. Hashem tells us when you have a physical threat, I will take care of you. You don't have to worry about it. When you have a spiritual threat, you have to fight. Hashem wants us to fight for our spirituality. And we see that during Hanukkah, we actually fought a war. During Purim, we didn't. We went and davened. What did Jews do? Mordechai gathered. When he didn't say take up arms, let's fight. Right. They fasted, and that's a miracle. And then about a year later, they also fought. A year later, the miracle happened first, and then a year later, the date that they were supposed to be almost a year, they were supposed to be killed. They had to actually fight, but the miracle happened. Haman was killed, and his 10 sons were killed before any of the fighting happened. They fasted and they went to shul and they davened, and Hashem made a miracle through Esther. In the times because when it's your physical, Hashem says, "I take care of your physical. You do your spiritual, I take care of your physical for you." When it comes to your spiritual well-being, Hashem says you got to put work into it. You got to put effort into spirituality. And that's why we, on a day-to-day level, when it comes to parnasa, making a living, you have to do your right thing. You can't put your whole head into it. You don't live to work. You work to live. When it comes to your spiritual, we don't say that, oh yeah, I'm going to learn a little bit. No, you need to put your whole head into it, and you need to work hard for your physical growth, your spiritual growth. Hashem expects us to work for the spiritual, and Hashem says, I'll take care of your physical. And we see that we see about Chanukah and Purim. Chanukah, and that's also a reason why, if you look at halakha, you're allowed to light the menorah with any oil.
Oh, yes, but it has to be only olives.
So the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash, if they did, there had to be, the best way was the pure oil with the seal of the Kohen's Gadol. But halakha is, if you don't have that oil, you're allowed to light with any oil.
Canola oil.
Well, no, I'm talking about olive. They had olive oil.
I mean in the temple. I thought you were talking about now.
Oh, now also. And there's also light with anything. The best is olive oil. But in the temple, it had to have the seal of the Kohen Gadol. But if you didn't have that oil, you were allowed to light with any oil. But they didn't do that.
Know that.
They didn't do that. The whole miracle. What's the whole miracle? That the olive oil with the seal lasted because they had other oil. Didn't have the one with the seal. But this is what's interesting. After this whole thing with the Hellenists and the Jews assimilating, when they went and they were looking for oil, they didn't find any without with the seal. They only found without the seal. The Maccabees said, we're not doing that. What's the real difference? It's the same oil. It has a seal. It has a spiritual stamp. We're not giving up on the spirituality. No. After what just happened, that it's all about the spiritual, all about trying to assimilate us. What's the difference? A seal, no different. We're not giving up even one drop of spirituality after what just happened to us. This is our battle. Our battle is that we only want the oil that has the seal. This is what we're fighting for.
Even though it was allowed to not have necessarily.
Halachically, if you don't have that, yeah, people don't know because that's the big.
I thought that was the whole point. That you must have it.
Halachically, if you don't have the one with the seal, you're allowed to use any other. And they were very, very strong about we're not using anything but the best, because we're fighting for the best. How come there was no oil with the seal? The Greeks actually went around breaking seals on all the bottle of oil. Would they care? Because it was all about that. It was all about, what's the difference? Seal, no seal. Kosher, not kosher. It says kosher meat with a staff, I'm telling you, this is from a cow.
Hebrew National.
No, I'm telling you, no, even real kosher meat, they open the seal. We don't need it. What's the difference? Your spiritual thing. It's okay. They open the seal on every bottle of oil. But the Jews knew it's the same oil. They just broke the seals. And the Maccabees said, we're not giving up on the spirituality. This is what they want. And because they were so strong, Hashem made a miracle. They found one bottle, and that bottle lasted for 8 days.
Wow.
It wasn't even a necessary miracle. It was just because they fought so hard for this. Hashem said, you're gonna get a miracle for this. You get miracles for fighting for spirituality.
Wow.
You know, at the end, not to ruin the story, the end of the Maccabees is actually a sad end. Because the Maccabees then ruled in Israel. They were very, very holy people, right? But years later, eventually they became corrupt. So they led Israel, and 2, 3, 4 generations later, they were kicked out because they were.
Yeah,
That's why we don't talk about them a lot. You don't hear about the Maccabees after that, right? That's Hashmonaim.
They were kicked out. There was a new dynasty, right?
Yeah.
When the temple was destroyed, that wasn't Maccabees already.
Right, exactly.
There was also, I think, a putsch. There was a overthrow, right?
Right, because they were corrupt by then.
Yeah.
But originally they were amazing.
Very interesting. Yeah, but they say original, those, how many sons did Judah
5.
Maccabee is the father, right? The priest?
No, Mattisyahu was the father,
Mattisyahu,
and
How could I
Yehuda is
forget?
the son that became in charge. One of them was killed in the battle, crushed by an elephant. I think Shimon.
I was about, how many sons? 8
There
or
were
9?
5. No, there were 5.
Oh, 5?
Mattisyahu had 5 sons: Elazar, Yochanan, Yonatan, Shimon, and Yehuda. So when Mattisyahu passed away, Yehuda became the new guy in charge.
It's always the baby that takes over.
What?
It's always the baby that takes over. Not
No,
the-
I think it was the
Supposed to be
oldest.
the oldest?
I just
Oh, okay.
named them like that. I think
Supposed to be the oldest.
you were the oldest. Gotta watch out for the. I was just naming them, not in order.
Raquel Rafua Shlema, Rachel, Esther Batzara.
Amen.
Hope you're feeling better.
Rachel's actually
Yeah, that's why she's gonna come, but she's here online now.
feel better.
Refuah Shleima, dear. Okay,
Thank you so much. I do wanted to also say that one of the
Yes.
reasons why that family, I also learned that their ending was not that pretty was because were from the tribe of Levi, and they took like the dynasty or like the kinship which belongs to Yehuda.
Yehuda.
Yes. So there is a whole like spiritual background behind that, and it had to happen the way it happened, of course, L'Shem Shamayim for the story of Chanukah, but
Wait, I'm confused. We're talking about, weren't they the high priest? Are we talking about they became kings?
But afterwards, yeah, they were the rulers.
Ah, they did both, which is what we have to have a separation of. There you go. You're right. I heard something about it. I don't remember.
of church and state, Lana, separation of churches.
That's what I'm saying. That's the Jewish equivalence of it, but it's true. The kings come from Yehuda and the high priests come from Levi. It's true. Kohanim come from Levi. That's why when you said it, I was like, the Kohanim are supposed to come from Levi. I didn't realize, but not this generation, right? Not the first generation of
Right,
Did
no,
they
they were
become-
tzaddikim. Tzaddikim,
I think
first
the third
generation,
or the
later on.
fourth, they decided that they also wanted, the dynasty wants to become the king, right? This is the whole, I think there's the whole story also, yeah. Okay, thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Hani. Thank you, everyone who joined.